All right, let's get into it. We're going to take a deep look at how gender really works in Buddhism, not just on the surface, but in its whole symbolic world. And we'll do it by looking at three big ideas: the father, the mother, and this third concept, the thus gone, which is a word for an enlightened being that might just show us a way past this whole binary problem.
You know, you hear this all the time, right? That Buddhism is somehow different, that it's the one world religion that's more or less free from all the patriarchal baggage we see elsewhere. But is that actually true? That's the big question we really need to get to the bottom of.
Well, if you go straight to the text, the answer is a pretty blunt no. It's just not the exception. For centuries, the subordination of women was literally written into the doctrine and built into the institutions. This isn't some minor flaw. It's actually baked into the very architecture of the religion as it was practiced for a long, long time.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to start with the first piece of the puzzle. Let's call it the father principle. This is all about setting up a very clear, top-down model of authority.
If you look at one of the most important texts, the Lotus Sutra, it uses these really powerful metaphors to build this exact structure. The Buddha is constantly shown as this father figure. You know, he's the rich dad saving his kids from a burning house, or he's the patriarch welcoming back his long-lost son. But these are not just heartwarming stories. They have a job to do. They're designed to frame the relationship between the teacher and the student as fundamentally unequal, to establish who has the power, who has the authority to pass down the teaching.
So if the father principle gets to be in charge, it kind of begs the question, where's the mother in all of this? Is that principle just gone? Well, no, not at all. The maternal is absolutely present, but it gets a very different and, yeah, a subordinate role.
And this chart just lays it out so clearly. The paternal principle, it gets the active role, the teaching authority, the voice speaking from on high. The maternal principle, on the other hand, gets cast as the ground of being. It's the container. Think of ideas like Prajnaparamita, which is called the mother of all Buddhas, or the Tathagatagarbha, the womb of enlightenment. So you see the split? One teaches, the other contains.
And that's really the bottom line here. The feminine principle is philosophically critical. You can't have awakening without it. It's the very womb where it all happens. But it's almost never the one holding the chalk, sitting in the teacher's chair, and wielding any kind of institutional power. That job was reserved.
This brings us to what is probably the most famous and maybe the most misunderstood story about a woman getting enlightened in the whole tradition. The story of the Dragon Girl. It's the one people always point to as proof that Buddhism is super progressive on gender.
And I mean, on the surface, this quote seems to settle it. An 8-year-old girl who isn't even human becomes a perfect Buddha in a flash. That sounds unbelievably radical. So, case closed, right?
Well, not so fast. There's a huge catch, a really big one, that changes the entire meaning of the story. Any guesses what it is?
And there it is. Her enlightenment has a condition attached. She can only achieve it after she magically transforms her body into a male one. So what the story is really saying isn't that a female can become a Buddha. It's saying she can become a Buddha, provided she stops being female first.
Now, this whole transformation thing wasn't just some random, weird plot twist. Nope. It was actually plugging directly into a specific doctrine called the 5 Obstacles, which flat out stated that being in a female body was a barrier to reaching the highest spiritual states, including becoming a Buddha. So the story was actually reinforcing the hierarchy, not tearing it down.
Okay, so that's the problem in a nutshell. But this is where it gets really fascinating, because the tradition itself, deep within its own philosophy, actually contains the very tools you need to dismantle this hierarchy. Let's look at how.
So let's take a figure like the bodhisattva Kannon. The texts say Kannon can appear in 33 different forms, male, female, not human at all, whatever form is needed to help people. So if you insist on using he or she, you're actually slapping a limitation on this being that the doctrine itself says doesn't exist. Using they, them isn't some modern political correction. It's actually just more doctrinally accurate.
We can even go deeper with a concept like the threefold truths. Think of it like this. First, you have emptiness. That's the feminine womb principle, the potential from which everything comes. Then you have provisional existence. That's the masculine generative principle, the actual world of things and forms. But, and this is the crucial part, the third truth, the middle, says that these two are a team. They are completely co-equal, you need both, and neither one is ranked higher than the other. There's no hierarchy at all. Now that philosophical idea is incredibly beautiful and elegant, but you still run into a very practical problem when it comes to religion, which is, what do you actually worship?
This brings us to a really clever solution that tries to get rid of the body problem altogether.
So here's the issue, what the source material calls the iconographic trap. The second you make a statue or a painting of a Buddha, you've given it a body. And a human body is never neutral, right? We immediately read it as male or female, we see its race, its age. You're immediately trapped in all these categories.
So what do? How can you possibly create a focus for devotion that doesn't immediately fall into this trap of gendering the ultimate reality?
This is where the innovation of something like Nichiren's Gohonzon is just brilliant. Instead of focusing on a statue, a fixed gendered body with all its cultural baggage, the main object of devotion is a calligraphic mandala. It doesn't show a person, it shows the Dharma, the teaching itself, written out in beautiful characters. It's not male, it's not female, it just completely sidesteps the entire problem. So, when you pull all these different threads together, you can see this core tension that has run through Buddhist history, this huge gap between the incredible potential of the doctrine and the often limiting reality of the human institution. The pattern is pretty clear when you lay it all out. The paternal principle was handed the keys to the institution. The maternal was made the philosophical foundation. But at the exact same time, you had these core ideas like the bodhisattva, the threefold truths, and innovations like the Gohonzon, that were all pointing to a reality way beyond a simple ranked gender binary.
And this, right here, might be the most powerful takeaway of all. The fact that so many Buddhist institutions became patriarchal wasn't because the doctrine forced them to. The philosophical tools for a much more equal, non-hierarchical path were there the whole time. A choice was made not to use them.
And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. If the frameworks and the ideas for real equality have been sitting there in the tradition for centuries, what is it about our institutions, back then and even today, that stops them from actually using that logic? It's a question that honestly goes way beyond just Buddhism.